Okay, for this first video, we're just going to go over converting between fractions and percent. So these are the questions I'm looking at. Check 1 and 2 on page 100. So the first one is 3 over 50 or 3/50ths, and we want to turn that into a percent. So if we want to turn a fraction into a percent, we can kind of think of it a couple different ways. The procedure that they're going through here works every time. So we can what we're going to do here is we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator to get a decimal. And then once we've got a decimal number, we multiply by 100 to get a percent, because percent is out of 100. So first I'm going to go 3 divided by 50. That gives me 0.06 or 6/100ths, which makes sense because if we're thinking about equivalent fractions, 3 out of 50 is the same as having 6 out of 100, so 6/100ths. And then we're just going to multiply by 100 to get a percent. Okay. So 3/50ths is the same as 6%. And again, we can do that in our head using our mental math by remembering that percent means out of 100, right? If you get 100% on a test, it means you got everything right. So it's out of 100. So if we have 3 out of 50, that's like having 6 out of 100, so that's 6%. So that'd be the mental math way of doing it. But we can also use this procedure because this will work when we have a fraction that maybe isn't as friendly, right? 50s we can convert to 100 fairly simply. If we had something maybe a little more complicated like 27 or something as the denominator, we might have a harder time with that. Our next example is 7/25, 7 over 25. So I can kind of have the same thought process. Again, the procedure that we were given, when we take the numerator, divide by the denominator, and then multiply by 100, that will always work. But in my head, I am actually thinking, wait, 25 actually goes pretty evenly into 100. I can do that without too much trouble. So if I'm thinking how many times does 25 go into 100, I might think about quarters, right? Because quarters are 25 cents and it takes 4 quarters to make $1. So that means I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times. So if I want an equivalent fraction that's out of 100, I would multiply 25 by 4. So multiply my denominator by 4. Means I also need to multiply my numerator by 4. So 7 times 4 is 28. So I think this is going to be 28%, but maybe I'll do it with the sort of procedure that we're given just to check and make sure. So the first thing I would do there is do 7 divided by 25 to get a decimal number. That gives me 0.28 or 28/100ths. The next thing I need to do is multiply by 100. So I'm going to do that, and my mental math was correct. I have 28%. So let's take a look at the next one. So next I have 3/5. I want to turn it into a percent, or express it as a percent, I guess. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, use my mental math strategy. So get an answer in my head, and then I'll go through the procedure to make sure I'm correct. So 3/5, the first thing I would think about is that 3/5 is the same as 6/10, right? If I double both the numerator and the denominator, I can write it out of 10. So I have 6 out of 10, then again, I can just sort of convert that into hundreds by multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by 10. So 3/5 is the same as 6/10, which is 60 out of 100. So I'm pretty sure this is 60%, but I can again go through the procedure just to make sure that I've got it right. So first thing I'm going to do is divide 3 by 5. So as I suspected, that gives me 0.6, which again, if we're saying it with place value, is 6/10. And then I'm going to multiply by 100. So this does in fact give me 60%. So that's just 3 different examples of how we can convert from a fraction and express it as a percent. Again, it's expressing the same amount, like they mean the same thing, they're just different ways of expressing it, and just sometimes we like one way better than the other for whatever reason. Usually whatever context sort of makes a little more sense one way or the other. for example, if this was like a quiz or something, and you knew you got 3 out of 5, well, that's helpful because it tells you that you got 3 questions right and then 2 questions wrong, and you can sort of look at it that way. But the 60% tells you maybe how that compares to, say, another quiz where you got 70 on it, or a different quiz where you got I don't know, 82 on it. That it just percents allow us to compare back to like a common denominator in this case, like that it's always out of 100. So they're good for comparing different fractions or different decimal numbers. But again, sometimes fractions just tell us more information that's specific to the particular context. So one isn't better than the other. It's just sort of different contexts make more sense for different ways of expressing numbers.